Our guest on the Motivation Show today is the author of the book, Find the Answers Within You, 10 Pathways Toward Self-Discovery. The book reveals the addictions and tragedies she overcame, as well as her eventual triumphs, and shares 10 pathways for readers to be inspired to live by. Welcome to the Motivation Show, Shannan Kym.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
Well, I know you've got a very intriguing story, one of those difficult upbringings. And so without further ado, tell us a little bit about how you grew up. Why was it so challenging?
So I am the youngest of 8 children, and I do have a half brother. So there was a total of 9 of us. So what was normalized within my family was mental illness, addiction, and abuse. So growing up, what ended up happening is my father is the one that abused my whole entire family. And who took the brunt of the beatings was my mother and my oldest brother. Unfortunately, at about 2.5 years old, my father ended up committing suicide. So what took place was my oldest brother ended up taking over the role of my father. So that's where my abuse and all of that took place through me growing up. So once I got to about, I'm going to say like my early, 5, 6, 7, that age group when I'm getting into school, where I started to have friends and I'm starting to see what other families are like, I realized that my family is not normal. And that was when I started to really realize that I don't like my upbringing at all. So what ended up happening is I started to become a people pleaser and a chameleon at a very, very young age. And then by the time I got into my years of being 12, 13, 14, I really started to really run from my family and be so shameful of my last name, my upbringing, all of it, because I grew up in a very small town in Canada. And so everybody knew each other's business. And so there was a reputation of our family that had already developed even years before when I was just a baby.
After your
So
father passed, where was the abuse coming from?
it came from my oldest brother.
Oh, from your
Yeah,
brother.
like
Okay.
yeah, from my oldest brother. Like he used to call us names. He used to physically abuse us, mentally abuse us. And like I was always on guard every single time that he was in our presence. And of course, my mother, because she was abused so badly by my father, and my oldest brother took on the role. He was exactly like my father. She never thought any different. Like that to her was her normal, which was so, so sad because she never protected any of us. So when he was doing all of this stuff to us, she would just sit there and watch. She never
Was there any
protected,
outside intervention from other family members
never.
or anybody who else noticed? No, it's just all
No,
insular within
people
the family.
knew,
Mm,
people knew,
right.
but you know what? They never said anything.
Mm.
And yeah, it was just so normal within our family. And then that was why in my later years I ended up breaking away. But in the meantime, I became a people pleaser, a chameleon. I ended up becoming an alcoholic. I attracted all you are who you attract. Like I had no self-worth, no self-esteem because my oldest brother had drilled into me for years that I was dumb, I was stupid, I was never going to amount to anything. And then, of course, really get into the horrible name callings to me and my sisters. So we truly believe that about ourselves. And then, of course, you are who you attract. So what did I ended up attracting? I attracted men into my life that disrespected me, that emotionally abused me. I eventually ended up marrying a narcissist as well too. So everything just really took a toll on me. And then it was in November of 2014 where everything really came to a head and I became extremely suicidal. I was to the point, Eli, that I was drinking up to 6 bottles of wine a day.
Oh,
And I was pretty much on my deathbed. I could not see a future. All I could see was darkness. I had no support from my husband, absolutely nothing, because of the way that he treated me all those years. And yeah, I ended up going into a treatment center, one of the top treatment centers here up in Canada. And I was there for 9 weeks. And that was where I really started to discover about, addiction and all of that. And then I quit drinking for approximately a year. Actually, it was a year pretty much to the date. And then it was during that year that I really got into bodybuilding and all of that. And then, but I went from one addiction to alcohol and I transferred it to addiction to exercise.
A
But
positive addiction, no?
yes, it
Yeah.
was. But the problem is it's not sustainable
Mm,
because my mindset hadn't changed. So what
yes.
ended up happening is I quit drinking for a year and then all these triggers started happening again because I hadn't dealt with them. And I didn't really know what triggers were at the time either, right? So I was reliving everything over and over again in my mind. So eventually what ended up happening is I relapsed. I ended up going back into, my addiction of drinking
So,
alcohol.
can I ask you a question, Shannon? So, obviously, growing up, you were not happy with the circumstances. You seem to have at some point recognized, that your brother was abusive. Why do you think then you would choose to continue in a similar pattern and choose people like that when you wanted to get away from that? How does that happen?
You know what? I think that happens on a subconscious level because at that time I didn't realize I had all these thoughts about myself in there. It wasn't until later on in my life when I had my awakening on August 17th of 2019 was when I literally woke up that day and I was like, what? And I did. Eli, I said this to myself. How in the hell did I get here? Like, how did I get here? And that was that shifted my life totally and completely because I actually sat in my stillness and I thought to myself, how did I get here?
Now,
And then
was there things leading up to that for like months or years, or there was this just like aha a moment out of nowhere where you just like woke up with some spiritual awakening?
no, where the beginning was when I went to treatment. I was starting to really, I was forced to see things for what they really were because I'd been in denial for all those years. But when I was in the treatment center and, counseling, talking every single day, and I became, more knowledgeable about addiction and my feelings and all of that, because of course, that's why, you end up having an addiction is because you're suppressing your feelings for all that time. And then when I quit drinking for that year, that was great because I could really start to see things in healthy boundaries. That was the beginning. But then the triggers happened. I went back to drinking again. And then that was when I was starting to realize again, like, what am I doing? So I drank for about 3 more years, somewhere in there, 2 years, somewhere in there. And then that was when it was like I had the awareness, oh my goodness, Eli, I'm going back to the life that I don't want. And I could see it because I had the awareness and I was like, no, I am not doing this. I have to confront all of these feelings. And what is it that I really have to be truthful about? And then I started to come to the realization I was in a horrible marriage. I had a horrible upbringing, just like I was abused, I was mentally abused, all of this. And then that was when it was like, no, I have to start dealing with all of this stuff.
Well, first, I want to congratulate you
Thank you.
because, in my opinion, you grow out of these things by acknowledging them and by
Yes.
being vulnerable enough to talk about them and to admit that. A lot of people in your shoes, Shannon, never really come to the realization that they're alcoholics, don't want to admit it, or are ashamed, or don't want to talk about it publicly. And I think it's just the reverse. I think when you do talk about it, you actually free yourself.
Oh, there is literally no question, Eli. From the moment that I asked myself that question, that was when things really changed for me. And the biggest thing that changed for me too, why I wanted to go forward and I wanted to heal and I wanted to be so extremely vulnerable was because I discovered my personal why I wanted to change. And it was because I wanted to be a good mother. Like I have got 4 beautiful, amazing children. And I looked at my whole entire family, Eli, and there is not one person that doesn't have an addiction, a mental illness, or they haven't been abused. Every single one in my family has that. And it's gone from generation to generation. Now it's now into my like great nieces and nephews. And I had a chance to save my own children, absolutely I'm going to. And I knew that it had to stop with me.
Well,
That was
the big
my
question,
biggest reason.
Shannan, is, how do you break the genetic chain? Obviously, there's some connection, between the generations. And I do believe that you can sever the cord, of the addictions and of those challenges. How do you feel you can do that?
Well, I went to the extreme, and I'm going to be honest with you. I literally went to the extreme. I had to set healthy boundaries. And anything that did not align with where I was going in life and to protect me, my sobriety, and also my children, I cut them totally and completely out of my life. So what ended up happening, I started really looking in I sat in my stillness, and this is one of my pathways in the book. I sat in my stillness, and that's where I really had a chance to go within and discovered who I really was and what I wanted in life. And from there, I could look to the outside world of all the people that were around me. Now, were they with me or were they against me? And sadly, I discovered that a lot of people don't like when you set healthy boundaries and you start to say no and you start to speak your truth, because then that makes them have to confront their truths, which they don't want to do. So what ended up happening in the end, Eli, is I have literally cut my whole entire family out of my life, sadly, because I have to protect who I am. I have to protect my purpose in life, which is my children and me in my sobriety. The next thing I looked at was my husband's side of the family. All of them are high functioning alcoholics. And, they weren't supporting me in my journey either. So I had to cut them out as well. A lot of my friends, I realized they were just my drinking buddies. And you really realize who your friends are when you no longer drink anymore, right? And
Oh,
so,
I know the feeling. I've
yeah,
not been a drinker, but once you start doing certain activities, people do not always adapt, and they were sort of one-trick ponies. If you're not in the game with them on that one trick, they're moving along. So,
yeah,
congratulations.
yeah. So I ended up, setting healthy boundaries in that area too. And then my last and final thing that I had to do was I had to get a divorce from my husband, because he's a narcissist. Through my whole entire journey, basically, he with a narcissist, nothing is their fault. They don't want to take accountability. And I was at a point where, I was being extremely vulnerable. I was taking responsibility for all my actions. I was on a totally different path. I was really studying personal development and mindset, and I was working on myself. And I was just going to levels and being introduced to people that I never ever thought that I would be. And, now, I did a TED talk down in Las Vegas, and like just so many different things. And I wrote my book, and like all of these different amazing, wonderful people started coming into my life, and he wasn't supporting me. He became actually quite jealous. And then, of course, from there, but our marriage had been in trouble for an extremely long time, because narcissists don't like when you set boundaries, and that very much was. And he didn't like the fact that I was drinking, but then he didn't like the fact that when I wasn't drinking anymore, I was setting boundaries regarding that, because he still wanted to drink. He still wanted to lead his normal life and think everything is so perfect, right? And it's not. It's
Well,
not.
the reason that a lot of people stay in the muck that they're in is they don't like to change.
They don't.
People
No.
like the dirty blanket, that that they're sleeping in
Yeah.
because it's their blanket. And so, in order to get things better, you do have to face change. How do you feel about change?
Oh my gosh, Eli, let me tell you, I absolutely love change. And the reason I love change is because of all of the things that I've gone through. And when you're uncomfortable, that's where you learn. And that's one thing I tell my children. If you're scared, if something comes up and you're scared, oh man, you got to do it. Because it's in that process of you being scared that you learn so dang much. And then once you get to the other side, it just opens up so many doorways to you. So change, I embrace change. I love change. Like I'm a girl in motion, man. Because if I didn't change, I would never, ever be where I am today. And I am so dang thankful
Well, it
for
seems
that.
like most of this good stuff has been happening in the last 3 or 4 years. If I had met you 10 years ago, Shannan, what would I have thought about you, you think?
You know what? I would have
Would I
conformed to
felt
whatever.
sorry for you? Would I have
No,
been
no, you know what? It was really shocking to people when I actually came truthful about my entire life, because it's amazing what people hide. And let me tell you, I had like what looked like the perfect marriage. I had this big, beautiful house. You know, we had the financial standings. You know what I mean? It was like I had it all. And people are looking at me and they're thinking like, oh my God, like look at her. You know what I mean? Like, what does she have to complain or anything about? People don't know what was happening behind closed doors. And another thing too is I was so damn good at being a people pleaser and a chameleon. I could conform to any situation. I could dress the part. I could do absolutely everything. But behind closed doors, I was devastated. I was killing myself. And so when I came and I confronted the truth, people were literally shocked. And people still are shocked. And then when I really hit rock bottom there, like really bad, when I couldn't hide it anymore, I was 80 pounds heavier. Like if you looked at me back in 2017, I don't even look the same. Like I have totally transformed every area of my life. Like I don't even look like the same person. When I'm on stage and I do my presentation and I show a picture at the very beginning, people are shocked. They can't even believe that that's me. That's how much I've transformed.
That's incredible. And so, what inspired you to write this book? Because you had all these other things to overcome. And so, why a book?
You know what? I'll be honest with you. When I actually sat down and started to write my book, I never even thought of me on a personal level. The only thing I could think about was if I could just help one person. If there's just one person that has gone through even a quarter of the stuff that I've gone through, then I know that I've done my due diligence. And it wasn't until after I had finished writing my whole entire book and I reread it. And I'm like, wow, did I actually go through all of that? Like the abuse and I lost a baby, like just everything. You know, I was just like, wow, like, is this normal? And I asked myself that question, like, is this normal? And I'm like, no, you know what? This isn't normal. So that is what really pushed me to like finish writing my book, for me to get on stage, because I know that I have a higher purpose. I truly know that and I feel it. And when people hear my story or they see me on stage or whatever, they're like, wow. They resonate with me on so many different levels, because it's not only about addiction, my story. You know, it's about being the outcast. There's so many different facets to my story. And I speak openly and honestly about it. I'm extremely vulnerable. I share my pain, and that's huge.
Well, they say that setbacks are setups for a comeback.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
often in your greatest successes and achievements in life do come from the setbacks that you experience. But not everybody is able to overcome those. And so again, congratulations in being such a good space. When I want to get into the nitty gritty, because you have listed 10 pathways for people to improve their lives. Would you like to share some of those?
Yes, absolutely. So my very first pathway is when you have your awakening. When you wake up that day and you come to the realization that, you know what, I don't like my life, or you don't like whatever situation is actually happening that is holding you back, that is bringing you down. That is the number one thing. And with my awakening, like I said, that was in August of 2019. And that was when I was like, I can't do this anymore, because if I do, I'm going to end up killing myself. And that was when I really started to make changes. And then the second one that is extremely important was, like I said, I asked myself that question, how in the hell did I get here? So that actually opened the gate for me to sit in my stillness. And I really, and stillness isn't something that you just sit in for like a couple days. Like you're sitting in it for a long time. And even still to this day, like how many years later, I still go to sit in my stillness because that's where I know all the answers are within me.
Well,
Because then,
if I can interject for a moment, just get back to the awakening, and I think you've already given me one of the answers to how do you deal with the overwhelm? Because once you have awakened, now you're in this overwhelm. Like, how do I fix all this stuff? And one of that is to be still.
yes,
What other hacks are there for people to awaken?
other hacks. Oh, jeepers. I don't think there is, like, it's different for every single person because so many people live different lives and there's different situations, right? So I'm not going to say there's an actual script because when I created my pathways, I'm going to give you an example here. So many people had asked me, Shannan, how did you get from where you were to where you are now? Because they cannot believe how I've changed in every area of my life. And it was so funny because I was like, you know what? I couldn't really explain it to them, Eli. I'm like, but then I realized as the months went on and I started continuing with my pathways that I couldn't because I hadn't embodied them all. And it wasn't until I embodied them all that was when I could explain it to them because I knew then what my pathways were. And so that's why I created them. So it's going to be different for every single person. But these are my pathways that I went through that I'm hoping that will help others once they read it. And they're going to be like, I get what she's talking about. It's a guideline. And so somebody else might have a pathway that could be their own. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do
That
get
makes
it.
sense? Yeah,
And,
yeah,
if you took all of the 10, I'm sure they're all your babies, right? They're all
yes,
important.
yes.
Is there any one that kind of stands out among the others that if somebody couldn't do the other nine or didn't get around to it, what would be the single most important one?
Identity. I absolutely love identity, and that's one of my main topics that I talk about on stage because my identity has totally changed from where I was to where I am now. Because growing up, my identity was I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I'm never going to amount to anything. And I embodied that my whole entire life, but I didn't know that I was embodying
And
that.
now you're a champion and now you're great. And how did you find that greatness? How did you realize how great you really are? Because I think you're really great.
I had to do a lot of freaking work. That was where I started studying with mentors.
Okay.
I started doing affirmations. I started to really decide in life, Shannan, what is it that you want? Where do you want to go in life? What is so important to you? Because if you don't know what you want, how's the universe supposed to provide any of that for you? Where are you going to go in life? You're just going to continue on that hamster wheel of life over and over and over again. And sadly, that's what so many people out there are doing. They get up every single morning and they go to work, they come home, they eat dinner, then they watch Netflix, then they go to bed, they get up the next morning and oh, they might
And
toss
they're
in a
10 years
week
older.
vacation. And they,
Yeah.
yeah, nothing's literally changed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're still hanging out with the same friends. And do you know what I mean? And it's just like, what is it that you truly want? Next thing you know, once you know that you want what you want, how are you going to achieve it? You have to become that individual right now to achieve that. Once I decided that I wanted to be a professional public speaker, I was like, okay, how do I go about doing it? How do I embody that right now? I didn't know, but you know what? I started taking steps, action steps, and that action step was I am going to hire a TED Talk coach, right? Then I started to embody that. Then I started working on my speeches and all of that. I didn't know where I was going to be speaking or whatever, you know? And guess what? I ended up speaking in Las Vegas. Like, you know
Not
what
too
I mean?
shabby. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you for
Straight
a
to the
TED Talk
showbiz
and for me to
capital.
be
I,
in,
I like
yeah,
that.
and me to be in Las Vegas. Another thing too is when I stood on that dot on that stage, that red dot, I knew I was home because I had visualized that over and over and over in my mind, me walking out on that stage and seeing that audience. And when I stood on that stage, and you know what? It was like I'm home. And after my TED talk was done, I had a standing ovation and there was not a dry eye in that house.
Wow.
That was
Well,
when I knew I knew I'm home and I have found my life purpose.
Well, that's another biggie in your book, right? You talk
Yes.
about visioning, how
Yeah.
important it is, to actually see the outcome, and
Yeah.
people who do see the outcome and people who do write on boards, vision boards,
Vision board.
do tend to have better outcomes. I know stories of people that as a kid, they wrote, they actually drew pictures of themselves catching a football and they end up playing in the NFL. It's a true story
But
of,
the biggest thing is stepping into that identity. I
yeah.
stepped into that identity of me being a professional public speaker. Do you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
and I do it every single day, and it's amazing. It's totally changed my life.
So what else in the 10 pathways would you like to share before we close out?
I'm going to go more to the end of the pathways now, and I want people to realize that one of them is transforming your pain into purpose. And so many of us, when we look at our pain, a lot of us, we either act like a victim. And I can honestly say that because I did for many, many, many years. I felt like a victim. And so I played on that. And that was why I suppressed all of my feelings and I ended up drinking alcohol and all of that, right? But once you really look at your pain and you confront it, it's actually a gift. And a lot of people will perhaps disagree with me right now because they're in the process right now of embodying that pain. But if you actually step back and you sit in your stillness, right, and you look at that pain and you start to take responsibility for everything that's happened to that point, which is also another one of my pathways, you will see that that pain has actually happened for a reason.
Well, I
And
think
it's
what you just
in
said
that
is very
reason.
powerful, about taking responsibility because so many people are in the blame game. And so they go their entire lives, it's one thing to acknowledge that you've had a rough childhood and people did certain things. It's another thing to, work your entire life blaming, which then gives you an out for why you're not going to do things, because
Yes,
it's like, it's their fault. That's why I'm not achieving, So there's got to be some point where you take responsibility and say, okay, I know what happened to me, but it's now, if it's going to be, it's up to me. No
right,
more excuses. It's it can happen. I get to choose my own identity, not somebody else. Those days are over. So it's a very powerful message that you're sending here, and
well, thank you.
yeah, and your book is just really terrific. Any other pathways you want to share?
Environment. That is the last pathway that I talk about in the book is environment. If you think that you're going to change your life and you're going to stay where you are, it's not going to happen because you got to get rid of all that toxicity within your life. So really look at what's happening within your environment. Are the people bringing you down? Are they with you or are they, against you? And a lot of people don't see that. And once you start setting those healthy boundaries or you're in that environment that isn't supporting you, you got to get rid of it. Like that. That's huge. Like every single I am so excited for, the audience to read my book because it it's it's going to change their lives and they're just going to be like, wow. And I have embodied absolutely every single pathway and I live by my pathways every single day. And yeah, like you know what? I'm just beaming here because I'm just so excited. It's an amazing book. Yes. Yeah. So just read the dang book.
Well, it is a great book, and I want to congratulate you again on
Thank
that
you.
and finding yourself. You seem like you're on a terrific path, and I urge the audience to go out and get Find the Answers Within You, 10 Pathways Toward Self-Discovery. And is there a website or other ways people can stay in touch with you?
You can go onto my website, shannankym.com, and just when you
Spell
spell
that
my name,
for us.
it's SHANNANKYM. So it's spelled a little different. So you can go onto the website there. I'm on all the social platforms. If you want to go onto Amazon, my book is there, of course. And yeah, just reach out if you have any questions.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, Shannan. Thank you for telling us your great story.
Thank you for having me.